But I don't need 4 segments of 45 minutes. I just need 4 separate times, even if one time is 15 minutes, because of the sugyas, the way I'm sort of being misaded in my head.
Give us a 2-minute break.
Yeah, we'll sing Mem Kamcha. Yesterday we discussed that there are 5 inyanim that the Tzimtzum Rishon accomplishes. And maybe it's a little bit splitting it here, maybe it's 4, but I told you 5 things. Number 1, Tzimtzum Rishon Siluk creates Machon. I was metayin to a maimed that the Rebbe said in Tov Shalom and Gimel, behemshech to Yud, the third maimed after Yud Shvat. I think it's Chamish also B'Shvat maimed, but I'm not sure. Where the Rebbe says, before the Tzimtzum, you cannot say Erein Seif Mamale Mokom Acholo. You can say Mamale Cholo Metzias. Not because there's no Mokom, but because the Mokom has no Metzias. Where does Mokom start? Mokom starts with Ratzon. Or maybe even with Sfiras and Kates, with Gilui. But you cannot call it Mokom until the Mokom is Mokom. Right? In today's Chitas, Hine Mokom Iti. Right? Huma Kamish Aleilam, Vein El Makamish, there has to be an Indian from the Abish just to let the Mokum be a Mokum. Tzimtzum Rishon creates Mokum. But the Vart that it created Mokum was, there was Mokum and an Eifan of Kolol Ba'atzmusay before the Tzimtzum. Whatever point it started, in Atzmus there's no Mokum B'Klav. Only in Erin Seif. But Lifnei Tzimtzum, whatever idea of Mokum was, had so not a Metzias that you can't even call it Mokum, which is Butler, you can just say Metzias is Butler. So Tzimtzum Rishon creates Mokum. That's number 1. Number 2, Tzimtzum Rishon, in fact, they didn't say, which is the Mokkar of Seif of Kalam. Correct? They didn't say, which is called Bligvol in this Maimed, is affected by Tzimtzum Rishon in the sense that's called Naga, it's touched by the Tzimtzum. What's a touch Naga by a Tzimtzum? Before the Tzimtzum Rishon, this Madrega of Seif was Begilui. And because before the Tzimtzum Rishon, this Madrega of Begilui was Mevatel everything. It's mevatel kelim, it's mevatel eirakav, it's mevatel everything. And grad you should know that in the Basi Legani this year, Tavshach Achei, this word, that as long as the Sefer Bligvul is present, the eirakav is no Metzias, the Fidikim is said the same word, which we have here in this painting. So the second effect of Tzimtzum Rishon is that the Erein Seif, which is truly Bligvul, right? Ef Shalias Mimenu Sfiras and Kates, that Rebbe said in Pedikin Zayin, was affected by the Tzimtzum that Lagabi Elam is its Behelam. Lagabi itself it's not changed. Lagabi Elam is it's called Tzimtzum Shleikim Pshuta. Right? There's actually it's called Naga by Tzimtzum. It's called Naga. It's been touched by the Tzimtzum. The third thing is the Kav. And the Kav is not Naga by Tzimtzum, it's Tzimtzum Mamish. The Kav is the creation of the Tzimtzum. Erein Seif exists before the Tzimtzum. The Erein Seif exists after the Tzimtzum. But the Madrega of Erein Seif, which we call Kav, does not exist before the Tzimtzum. It's created by the Tzimtzum itself through this idea called Bekia. It has to fight through Cheshach and Tzimtzum, as I discussed with you last night. And that's how it goes from being an eagle, which means an Erwish cannot go into a Keli, to being Yosha, the bell to go into a Keli. Okay, now hold on to this third idea, because that's what we're talking about. The third idea is that Tzimtzum Rishon creates the Kav. The fourth idea is that Tzimtzum Rishon creates Kelim. By removing Eir, the Kelim that existed before the Tzimtzum, what we call the Keach HaGvul, or the Asius of the Shima, Kelim HaTzimtzum, before the Tzimtzum, the Erein Seif Habligavul is Mevatel Dem Lagamre. When the Erein Seif is removed, Siluk Lagamre, Erein Seif is completely removed, so the Kelim become a Metzias. That's number 4. And number 5 is that the Kelim become a Metzias in such a way that even when the Eir is going to come back, the Kale is going to be the Tatagov. The Kale is going to be first. But the truth of the matter is, I should add another point, a 6th point. Which, to have an Oilam, you have to have 2 separate things. Eir and Keli. It doesn't have a prison in the Neshama and a Guf. 2 separate things from 2 different Kelis. Before the Tzimtzum, Eir and Keli were together. The Tzimtzum Rishon separates Eir and Keli, and then after the Tzimtzum, when they join, it's the joining of 2 things. So you could say, if you wanted, I should have added to my list of things that you can't read on your page, that the Hazek for Tzimtzum Rishon is, that Tzimtzum Rishon affects that even when Eir and Keli meet After the Tzimtzum, it's the meeting of two things that are now separate. Before the Tzimtzum, Eid and Keli were together.
Isn't that a part of the
Huh?
Isn't that a part of the fourth thing, the creation of Keli?
Look, it's a part of the fourth thing. It's for sure a part of the fifth thing. I'm splitting here. So I said 5. You want to say 6, so that'll be the 6th. Okay? Ich beschreibe Moichet, also sein zufrieden.
It's really 4. Because the last 3 are all in the same.
I agree with what you're saying altogether. I agree. Okay? But remember, the numbers are arbitrary. The union is the ideas. What is the issue of our Pedic? The third one. Right? That we said that the Tzimtzum Rishon creates the Kav, because before the Tzimtzum Rishon there's no such thing as Eid Kav. Before the Tzimtzum Rishon there's a thing as Eid Ein Seif. And Eid Ein Seif is eagle. You know what eagle means? It's Seif Kalam. Which means you put Eid Ein Seif into a Keli, it either destroys the Keli or goes straight past it. There is no possibility for what we call Gilui. There's no possibility for Slapshus. Even what you're learning in the Samach Vav, the Madrege of Eid Ein Seif, which is called Chitzenius Eid. In Samach Vav, there's no Asasviris Enayim. There's only Pnimius and Chitzenius Eid. Chitzenius Eid Lefnei HaTzimtzum. In other words, the Madrege of Eid Lefnei HaTzimtzum, that through the Tzimtzum is going to become Kav. Before the Tzimtzum, it's not a Kav. It's eagle. That Madrege of Eid Ein Seif, if you were put into a Keli, would slide straight over it. Because the idea of Kav is created by the Tzimtzum itself. Okay? What's the mashmos of the Eitz Chaim? The mashmos of the Eitz Chaim is not like what I just told you. The mashmos of the Eitz Chaim, and remember, the mashmos of the Chaim is only a mashmos. Because L'Payol, Tzimtzum Rishon has to be Silik L'Gamri because of Kalim. Because issues number 4, 5, and 6, okay? But there's a mashmos, it's mashma from the Eitz Chaim, that the Eitz Chaim is trying to say that theoretically, you did not have to be misalik, the Eid HaKav completely and then bring it back. You could leave it over. Which means that the Eitz Chaim is saying that the Eid HaKav does not need the Tzimtzum itself to create it. The Eid HaKav does not need what I keep on calling the Bekiah, the fighting through Chayish Chatzimtzum to become Yosher. You'll see this in the third shir on this Maimed, yeah? On the bottom of page Lameches, that is called Mazel, it's called Ha'ara da Ha'ara Kav. It's a Ha'ara, it's Eid Ein Seif, but compared to the Eid Ein Seif HaBeligavos, it's called the Ha'ara da Ha'ara. Ha'ara of Dallas. Shaitis. So, in earlier Maimorim, we say that this idea of Eid HaKav is created by the Tzimtzum. But the Eitz Chaim is mashma that you don't need the Tzimtzum to Eid Kav. So the Rebbe Rashab says it depends on the Maimonides. In the Maimorim for the Chaim Beis, the Kav has to be created by the Tzimtzum. No Tzimtzum, no Kav. Because the Eitz Shifnei Tzimtzum is eagle. And instead of Tzimtzum can't go into a Keli. But in the Shita Chaim Beis, that there's a Sfiris and Eid. Now remember, the Ikar Chiddush is not just a Sfiris and Eid. What's the Ikar Chiddush? Huh? When in doubt, say Kavanah. The whole Indian of Eid is Gilui. And the Indian of Gilui starts from Atzmus. So B'meila, in the Shita of the Ayin Beis, that mitzad ha'atzmos there's a Kav. And mitzad ha'atzmos, the Kav's purpose is to go into a Keli, then you don't need Siluk. You don't need the fight between the Eid Ein Seif and the Tzimtzum to create the Kav. The Kav was created to be Yosher. The Kav was created to be Ner Pnimi by itself. So the Rebbe Rashab says in this Pedic that there is an Eitz Chaim, right? And I'm going to use now Graba Esis, okay? That in the 100 Maimorim where the Eitz Chaim was quoted, no one ever understood it. Why? Because in all the Maimorim, the quote the Eitz Chaim, we explained that the Kav is the creation of the Tzimtzum itself. But mashmos, the mashmos of the Eitz Chaim is not like what we say in all those Maimorim. The mashmos of Eitz Chaim is that the Kav could be created through miyut. You don't need to have siluk. And yet all Maimorim speak about siluk. And for the Gemara, in the Maimorim, before the Ayin Beis, Yitaka needed siluk. Because the Kav is created by fighting with the Chayish Chatzimtzum, and the Chayish Chatzimtzum makes the Shir, the moves of the Eid. Then it becomes Ha'ara da Ha'ara, that it becomes Yosher, that it becomes Pnimi, which goes into a Keli. But according to this drush holds that the kavod of the whole creation is Gilui. And the beginning of Gilui comes from Atzmos. So Lifnei Atzimta is already a kav. Not just as a secondary oil. There's an oil whose purpose is from the beginning to go into Keli. So the Meshmos Eitz Chaim is correct. See what the Rebbe Rashab is saying? But gelernt Eitz Chaim 150 years. And there was a kasha in Eitz Chaim. And there was no teretz. Let me tell you the teretz. What's the teretz? That's a Sfiras in nature. So in the previous Maimer we had 5 inyanim. 5 inyanim. That the Rebbe Rashab revisited. That are on 100 Maimorim before. As a Sfiras Neknuzis and as a Sfiras in Atik. And the inyan of Keach HaGvul. And the inyan of Avayda La'el and Avayda La'tata. And the whole question of Sfiras St. Kate was as a Sfiras Neknuzis. Right? Which we talked about, right? And in each one of these 5 sugyas, the Rebbe Rashab says, let me explain it to you how it is. Lefi drush there. So the Rebbe Rashab starts shlach by saying, I want to tell you a 6th thing. That the way we learned to say it's Chaim, and I brought it before, they do not address this mashmos. They ignore the mashmos. They can't help the mashmos. But we can. Now that we understand the Universitas and Eir. And now that we understand the Universitas and Eir is the inyan from Eir Pnimi B'yetzim. From Pnimi, from Atmos of Eir. The Eir is Pnimi. You don't need the symptom to make kav. You don't need the symptom to have a fight with Ein Seif, that the Ein Seif should change in its mahos. It's well to go with the Kli. The Kli was a Chatchila made in such a knife. So the Mashmos and Eitz Chaim stands correct. You got it? Yeah? What are we going to learn today? We're going to learn the other Shita. We're not going to learn our Shita. We're going to learn the classic Shita. And I'll try to show you the Nafkaminis. It's interesting. Because what ends up happening is you see 1,000 little differences. Mamish, 1,000 little differences between before the Ayin Beis and in the Ayin Beis. And one of them is radical. Now, I don't want to give you a speech now. I want to learn. But everybody knows that the classic mashal for Tzimtzum Arishin is Rav and Talmud. And that the classic way we explain the mashal of Rav and Talmud is that Rav has to turn his brain off. Because until he turns his brain off, he doesn't know how the Talmud thinks. You listening? How would you say that mashal lefi drush zeh? The mashal.
Finds it within himself without telling his brain.
The Rav has seichel Talmud in him. He doesn't need to turn off his brain to know how the Talmud thinks, because somehow he already knows how the Talmud thinks. You know why? Pnimi b'yetzim. When a dad take avodah. So the whole mashal of Rav Talmud Tzimtzum Arishin, which explains that the reason that Rav turns off his brain that he should see how the Talmud thinks is not necessary in this Maimer. It's amazing. In other words, what's happening is that Rebbe Rashab is taking so many pratim in Chassidus and showing you how they're going to end up being different in this drush. Point after point after point. Now, not all of them does he flush out completely, but this is going to be Derech Aga pushing. But Derech Aga, you're going to see it. Look inside. We're on page Lamed Zayin, 2nd paragraph, 4th line. Okay? I don't understand. Now, what's the Rebbe asking a kasha on? He's asking a kasha and the mashmos of the Eitz Chaim. But we're building a pilpul on a mashmos. I don't want to call it a hava amin because it's not a hava amin, it's a maskana. But it never happened. Right? Tzimtzum Arishin is not miyut. Why not? Please know the answer. Because of Caleb. But mitzad the inyan from Kav, the mashmos is, it could be a miyut. So we're building a whole ariches. It's two maimorim. It's not, this is going to go on for a while. This idea. The mashmos is that mitzad the eira kav, you don't need silka gamri, you could leave it over. So the Rebbe says, really? What about all the maimorim before? And he quotes them. He quotes the classic understanding of the relationship between kav and tzimtzum and kukinavin. And we don't understand. How could the Eitz Chaim have such a mashmos? Now you must understand, the Eitz Chaim's mashmos is our maskone. Because we're learning a different shita. But the Rebbe asks the kasha on the mashmos of Eitz Chaim from what he learned in all the Maimorim before. Halei mevua bekama mekemis. How many Maimonim say it? In footnote 9, he brings Teda Eid, and the Mekemis, Shenismenu Bahar Abba, it's Anashir Pletzit. Huh? Sheberdei Sheyi Gili Eid Hashayach Elamis. And he doesn't retain to the Samvov, I don't know why. In order to have a Madrega Venitef, which is connected to Elamis. Now you must understand, Eid Hashayach to Elamis means Eid Pnimi. You understand what I'm telling you? The Tzimtzum Addition takes away other Eid so the Kalim becomes strong. But the Tzimtzum Addition also creates a new Eid that could go into the Kalim. And before Drush Zeh, this new Eid, which will go into the Keli, Pashut was not b'metzias before the Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum created. Says the Rebbe, not just for the sake of Keli, but for the sake of Kav, that there should be an Eid which we call Pnimi, an Eid which could, in theory, go into a Keli. The Eid that was before has to be completely removed, and there has to be an interruption in Eid, right? And then when the Eid comes back, so remember, the Eid ain't safe, unbelievable. Finish the sentence. What happens to him? Tzimtzum. It comes after the Tzimtzum, Rev Helen. But the Eid ain't safe, Kav, which in Samavav is called Keich HaGvul. And we don't want to call it Keich, we want to call it in between Keich HaGvul and Keich HaBlikvul. It's Tzimtzum. The Kav is created by the Tzimtzum, by the fight between the Eid safe and Tzimtzum. Says the Rebbe, what's the Hamashal? When a teacher is teaching his students ideas, right? Now, of course, I can hear Rabbi Yel saying to Shurim. I had the tapes. When I was in 770, Rabbi Yel taught only a Mammon from the Rebbe. But the Samavov, you had the tapes. I basically had the tapes. And we were all Talmidim of Rabbi Yel. I heard the tapes. I can hear him saying it. We have a Rav and a Talmud, and I always give you the mashal from Achei Temimim, a picture. Riyan Shmir, one person seich madrega b'riyah. Everything fits together into an actus. And the other guy has a bunch of different ideas, right? We talked about it twice already this year.
Yeah.
The Rav, 3 times. So the Rav, who sees the picture, you remember? I can repeat it. You good? The Rav sees a picture. His whole Torah is unified. I told you the story with the Rebbe and Rabbi Yosef Kapach, and then Madu Madur and Rambam, and that he shouldn't change the halachas to Beis Yosef because he has his own Torah, because it's a mikshachas. All the halachas are connected. That's why you can ask a kasha if one Rambam on another, because the Rambam's Torah is not put together by a bunch of dinim. The Rambam's Torah is a radiation from a saga of the whole Torah, and every halacha comes from his version. It's a picture. The Talmud doesn't have a picture; it's a bunch of little details. Again, I heard this. I didn't hear the Rebbe heard that the Rebbe at the Gezok, at the Rogat Gezok. It's called La Torah Kula the Achas. The whole Torah is 1 point, and by me it's 10. In other words, the Rogat said, if I would be even deeper, if I would understand the Torah, I would see how the 10 is actually 1. But I haven't reached that madrega. But the Gedel Rishonim, the Rambam, yeah. So if you have such a Torah, and you have to teach a Talmud that doesn't see anything, so you have to decide how to teach. So first of all, you have to decide which part of your picture you want to teach to the Talmud. And second of all, if you're going to start describing a piece of a picture, the Talmud is going to get so confused. So you have to reconstruct it in the Madrega Seichel HaTalmud. The only way to do that is to turn off your brain, so you know how the Talmud thinks. You allow the Talmud's brain to enter into your empty space. You know how his brain works. When you turn your brain back on, the idea that you choose to teach, you could teach it if they sing the Talmud. I told you this, that my father told me, the Gesund. The Rebbe used to prepare the Rashi Shlicha Thursday morning by Kiyah. When the Rebbe did Kiyas HaTeira, I mean, when you go to 770 now, the place where the Rebbe Dav Mincha Ma'ariv is blocked off. The door is always closed. You know what I'm talking about? You ever go upstairs in 770, small zal? They put a table in such a way that the place where the Rebbe stood is blocked. The door is never open. That door used to open, so they would come in. Yeah. So, Mincha Ma'ariv, the Rebbe would walk in, Chadakov would walk in behind the Rebbe, and he would close the door. So the Bacham who stood in the hall could not see the Rebbe during Mincha, because the Rebbe is facing Mizrach, and it's not very gishmak. The Rebbe is facing Mizrach, and there's people in front of him looking into his face. My father told me that the Rebbe's real place was on the far side of the room. Could you picture the Zal upstairs or not?
Yeah.
If the Rebbe walks out of the side of the room, there's Aron Kaddish, then there's one place, then there's a door, then there's another place, and then the wall juts out, and then there's another door. The Frierdiker Rebbe sat in the corner.
The right or left side of the...
On the right side. On the right side. The Rashag was on the other side of the door. The Rebbe was behind the curve. The Rebbe's place was behind that curve where the second door is. There's 3 doors going into that shul. There's now a 4th going to the chutzah, but there used to be 3 doors. One on the left, one on the right, and one on the middle, the wall between the 2 rooms. The Rebbe's place, when he davened shachas upstairs, the Rebbe's place was there. So the Frierdiker was in the corner.
Which door was there? The right or left?
The Rebbe was in the door going to the Cheder Sheni.
We used to go through the Cheder Sheni.
What the Rebbe did, it's before my time. I never really saw this, but I heard about it. When the Rebbe davened,
the door was open for that.
So when the Rebbe davened Mincha Ma'ariv, he stood by the door in Tzafin. He didn't go across the Zal.
He's talking about before the Nesias.
No, after the Nesias, when upstairs was the main shul.
You're saying about the Frierdiker Rebbe.
Bam Rebbe Meichet. Until they built the shul downstairs, the Rebbe davened upstairs. Shachas Mincha Ma'ariv. That was his place. My father told me the Rebbe hated the door was open. The Bachamis opened the door to the hall so they could look at the Rebbe. And the Rebbe didn't like it. He wanted the door closed. When the Rebbe davened Mincha Ma'ariv at the other side, where the pushka is, the Rebbe pushed a daven near the door, mamish. So the Rebbe used to walk in, the Kohen would hobble in behind the Rebbe and close the door. But by Kriyas HaTeira, the door was left open. So the Bachrim, because there wasn't davening, it was clear. And the Rebbe didn't face Mizrach, he faced Darim. So the Rebbe would walk in, the door stayed open. And the Bachrim used to stand behind the Rebbe, and the Rebbe during Kriya used to look in the Chumash, and he would point in his finger on the Rashi. And when the Rebbe pointed to the Rashi, there were 2 things. Number 1, that means it was going to be a Fabrengen, and number 2, he was going to speak on that Rashi. That's how we knew what Rashi there was going to speak on. So my father said he couldn't find another time to appear except Shas Kriyas HaTeira. He said, this is the word. He had to be amongst the dumbbells to know how dumb it needs to be. Now, the Rebbe spoke 1,000 sichas. He didn't have that problem. Pumfis comes to Chumash Rashi. You know, the Rebbe used to say Baal Peh everything. But the Rashi, he looked inside every week, and the Zohar, the Rambam, he knew Baal Peh. But every week after the Maimon, they would open the Chumash and look inside. He'd open Faz Birub and look inside. What these 2 Svarim had to look at. Chadakov used to bring them in for the Rebbe and carry them out. That was Chadakov's job. The Rashi with the Zohar, he looked inside after the Maimon. The Rambam he knew by heart, the Pirkei Avos knew by heart, the Beis Rivka he knew by heart, Kol HaTeira knew by heart, the Rashi and the Rambam and the Zohar had the 2 great Nachem Maimon. But Thursday morning, so this is the part of this is the Machon of Tzimtzum, that you have to have Sila Kagami to notice that there's a Talmud. But that only works in the sheet of Eidos Pshutim. Why? Because what is that Mashal saying? That Mashal says, till the Rav turns off his brain, there is no Seichel Talmud. You get it? What about in our Drush? The whole word of our Drush is that the Kavona Pnimi B'yetim is Talmud. So before Tzimtzum Rishon, Kayachol the Rebishter already has a Ashara of the Eir Pnimi because that's the Kavona. So the mashal of Rav Talmud changes. Not just the understanding of Tzimtzum, the mashal, the classic mashal for Tzimtzum Rishon, which every Bible Rav the Chad knows. Any person, any Chassidus knows this mashal. That why does Tzimtzum Rishon have to be Siluk? Because the Rav does not have any Ashara how a Talmud thinks till he turns his own brain off. And when he turns off his brain, he hears that a Talmud thinks, then he can teach him. What's the Nimshal? Before Tzimtzum there is no Kav. What's Kav? The Madrega Sechel HaTalmud. So Siluk Lagamri opens up Kayachal the Eibishter to the Madrega Sechel HaTalmud. So the Kav is created by what? By the Tzimtzum itself, by the Siluk. But Lafi Drush Zeh, where does the Kav come from? It comes from the Eibishter. So the Mashal. So you see, what I'm trying to show you is so many things are going to change. A lot of little things are going to change before the Ayin Beis, not Ayin Beis. Because Ayin Beis, because it's a new Shita, is going to change not just one thing. Ariba and Yorim become different because of this moment. And one of them is the Moshe of Rabbi Talmud. So the Rebbe Rashab macht sich nicht wissendig. He says, I don't understand. I learned in a Maimer. What did I learn in a Maimer? That in order for there to be a Kav, you have to have Siluk. Al derech Moshe Rav, if you want to have Madrega Seichel HaTalmud, he has to turn off his brain to know what the Talmud is thinking. But this whole kasha is based on the earlier Maimonim. The house cups in it. Yeah, lama they didn't innovate. Okay, do a hamashal, but we all know the mashal. Bashpos haseichel. When a teacher teaches a student, the beseichel rav k'meishul yatzmei. The seichel rav is by himself. And again, I can hear Rabbi Yossi saying it. Rea. Yeah, the rav becomes the rea. There's no recognition. There's no evidence. There's no distinction. There's no separating the idea of Madrega Seichel Talmud, which is Shmiya, because the Rav is in another universe. Only when the Rav turns of his Seichel Madrega completely, as I then Nivdal V'Niked, it becomes separate and evident. The light which the student is able to receive, which is the marshal for Erakav. So you need some Rishain to create that Madrega Ver. Okay? So the Rebbe says, I have a kasha on the mashmos. I don't understand what the Eitz Chaim is thinking. In other words, first of all, it's only a mashmos, right? Lapoel, the Eitz Chaim also agrees that Tzimtzum Vishan is Silagam because of Caleb. But the mashmos says that Mitzad Erakav doesn't have to be Silagam. What are you talking about? We all know the mashal. Until the Rav turns off his brain completely, there's no Madrega Seichel Talmud. In other words, there's no Erakav. How could the mashmos be that the tzimtzum, that the kav does not need siluk, it's enough meal? So now the Rebbe is asking the kashif on our Maimid from all the Maimodim there before the Ayin Beis. How could the Eitz Chaim have a mashmos? 6 lines from the bottom of the page Lamed Zayin. The light of the kav should remain. That the kav should not be taken away. That somebody should move the Eid applicable. But the Eid kav is left over. There is no Eid kav until you take the Eid away. There's no such thing. Just like a Rav, before he turns off his brain, doesn't have Seich B'Nei Hamid. What's the tenets? The tenets is that whole mushal doesn't work in Ayin Beis. It works in the Shita and it's Pshutim. Says the Rebbe, that's his Pasha. Since in this minor, there is a shade, a root and a source of the kav, for the ends of the Esesfiras Agnuzis. Okay? And the Esesfiras Agnuzis are not going to be a mistake from Eidin Seif believable. They're their own oil, and their shadish is an etzem of Eidin Seif, because Eidin Seif is pnimi b'yatzem. Right? When in doubt, say kavanah. The Eibishter wants Gili from the beginning. So lifnat simtzum the kavanah is for Eid Pnimi. She'ein ze bechinas atzmos Eidin Seif applicable. That this Esesfiras Agnuzis is a whole separate area from the Eidin Seif, which we call Machon Seif of Kalalmin. Rak, it is only ma that this Eirakav, this light, which is meant for Pnimi from the beginning, is klulam be'Eidin Seif, is included in Seif applicable. So it's bottled, but it's a separate Eir. In the sheet of Eidus Pshutim, the Kav is created by the Tzimtzum. In the sheet of Eidus Mitzayadim, in the sheet of Esesfiras and Eid, the Sfiras are created, the Pnimi is created by Atzmos. So Taka, the Moshe of Rav and Talmud, does not allow for this mashmos, because the Moshe of Rav and Talmud only works according to that sheet. According to this sheet, you have to have a new Moshe of Rav and Talmud. Yet the Moshe of Rav and Talmud, with the Rav Mitzias Be'etzim, is to be a mashpia. Imagine a Rav that from the moment he's born, his whole purpose is not to learn Torah by himself, but to teach others. Like a Rebbe. The Rebbe wrote about himself that the first job of a Rebbe is ashpah on other people. And afterwards come Avedase B'Tor Prat. The Rebbe wrote about himself. So by such a person, his chatchila made for an Eid Pnimi. And when you talk about the Eid HaKav after the Tzimtzum, compared to the Esesfiras Agnuzis Lifnei Tzimtzum, it's Bechinas Gili Ahelem, it's being revealed to the Tzimtzum. Now, Rabbi say this word Gili Ahelem is the end of the previous Maimed. Remember? Is Atzilas Yeshmayayin, or is Atzilas Gili Ahelem, enters the Gabi Esesfiras Agnuzis Gili Ahelem, Gabi Eidin Seif, it's Yeshmayayin. He says, the Rebbe Ken Yitzchak HaKosher, so the Mashmos of Eitz Chaim is true. It's true. But only the feed Drush there. And another thing which we have to change is the Moshe of Rav Talmud. The Moshe of Rav Talmud doesn't work. The way we understand the Moshe of Talmud, another Maimonim, Pasha does not work in this Shita. Because according to the Shita, before the Rav turns off his brain, he already has Seichel Talmud in his brain. Second line from the bottom. Why was it necessary that in Tzimtzum Marish, the Eidin Seif that's being removed is not just the Eidin Seif Abeligo, but also the Eidin Seif which is the Makar of the Kav? Hare, emphasis. Hoyo Maspik. It would have been enough. She is alim rak bechina ha'orsha bechinas Eidin Seif. If you remove the Eidin Seif, which is called Svidus and Kate, which is the Makar of Seif Kalamin, the Yishoyer Rakav. Leave it over. Now who's asking this kasha? Who's asking this kasha? Please answer correctly. The Eitz Chaim is asking this kasha. And this kasha is a mashmos. And the Rebbe Rashab says this kasha, this mashmos, was not understood in Maimonides Chassidus until the Shita of the Ayin Beis. Because the Shitas before needed Tzimtzum Rishon itself to create a Rakav. There is no Rakav for Tzimtzum Rishon. But in the Ayin Beis it works. You see what's going on? The Rebbe Rashab is fixing. Edel, lach edel. What's the pasuk?
Isn't the most important before that the Tzimtzum by the Rav is separating the Seichel Shaykh to the Talmud?
First of all, it's noticing it.
But it existed before.
No, it existed before. It's not there's no mitzias, and it's being created because of the siluk.
And by us.
It exists before.
It's also not felt. It also has been mitzias.
But the only reason it's not felt is because they didn't safe. You take away they didn't safe, it's there.
Isn't that exactly the same?
No. In the other Shita, it's a piece of the Eidin Seif that's being changed. In the other Shita, there's no two Eidis.
So what's the separation?
The separation is that at the moment of the Tzimtzum, you notice Madregas HaTalmud, and you notice Kalim, and the notice of Madregas HaTalmud, notice Kalim, creates in the Eid a new Inyan. But before that, you don't have it in the Eid.
So what does it mean, Nikr Har Shaykh al Kabul?
If a guy has a brain that works on 1,000, it can be sure work on 10. Yeah, but it never did, and it's a huge avoida and a huge symptom for him to come down to 10. That's Eini Nikir. In other words, there's two ways of understanding Eini Nikir. One way of understanding Eini Nikir, it means I never thought like that. Another way of understanding Nikir is I thought about that, but I'm not thinking about it now. There's two different approaches. In the Machon of Rav Talmud, according to the earlier Maimorim, Eini Nikir means the Eidin Seif never was made into this tzir. It's not going to be made into this tzir until the tzimtzum. But when it's made into this tzir, it's taken from the Eidin Seif. The Kelim are not creating it. The oil has that possibility. But the oil never brought that possibility out until the tzimtzum Rishon. Mashenkin and our Shita, that possibility exists already. Let me go back to the mashal that I gave you. Right? You have the sugi of Shvachim. Remember that sugi of Shvachim? Yeah? So the Rebbe brings, what's the difference between the Mashbeach and Mashbeach the Eibishter? The difference is when you're Mashbeach before you gave him the Shavach, those in Yonim he already has been Metzias. The Eibishter gave them to him. Because Mashbeach is Mugbal. By the Eibishter, until you're Mashbeach, it doesn't exist. But when you are Meshabeach, you're not creating it. You're bringing it out from the state of Einei Nikir to the state of Nikir. Those two Mishalim of Shevach apply Lamaila according to the two Shitas. According to our Shita, the Eibush is like Rashbi. Why? Because there's an Iyam for P'tima B'yatzim, which is not connected to Tzimtzum Rishon. It's not a Rikki Terotzim. You follow what I'm saying? So the Moshe of Rabbi Talmud is a different Moshe. In the other Maimorim, Einei Nikir means that Pasha didn't exist before. It did exist before because the Klal Messiah Mona. But it's no Matthias. But in our Dush, it existed before because the Kavanah is Gilui. When in doubt, take Kavanah. You follow what I'm saying or not? It's a real nafkamina. It's a real nafkamina. Now, how does the Mashal B'chlal work now? How does the Mashal B'chlal work now? It's a different Mashal. So as the Rebbe says 3 lines in the bottom, Yitzchak HaKusha, the Eitz Chaim becomes right according to Drush there. The mashmos of the Eitz Chaim, that Tzimtzum Rishon does not have to require Siluk is true, but only in this Maimer. Huh? The Mipneiman, the Salam, Gamri, why does the Eidin Seif have to be removed completely? It will be sufficient to remove the Eidin Seif, which is bleak of all, Sfiras and Kate, or as we call it, classically the Mokav Seif of Kalalman. Leave it over. It's not only because there's Esesfiras Lifnei Tzimtzum, it's because there's an union of Pnimi Lifnei Tzimtzum. Don't you understand? The key is not that there's Esesfiras. The key is that the Eibush just Kavanas Gilui in Kalim Tilatzmus. So you don't have to have Tzimtzum Rishon to create Pnimi. Pnimi was created by the Eibush himself. So that's Chaim's Kasha, the Mashmos is Chaim, which 100 Maimorim had to gloss over. We're now understanding correctly. But on the other hand, now your point. If there wouldn't be a Tzimtzum at all, says the Kav could never come out. Why? Because Kasher, and this prat that Avatar Moshe would hold true. Kasher Heyer, Ha'esh, Bechin is believable. So long as the Madrega of Eidin Seif, which is believable, which we call Sfiras and Kates, Mokar Seif Kalama, Noga by a Tzimtzum is revealed. This is the bus of the guy. The Eira Kav is completely washed away. It's there. Now, in the earlier Maimorim, it's not the pshat that's washed away. It's not there yet. But in our drush, it is there. And again, the real nafkamina is not whether there's an inyan of Eses Fides or not even Eses Fides. It's whether the inyan of Pnimi. Kavona Gilui. In the drusha before, there's no such thing. In the drusha before, the inyan of Gilui comes from the Tzimtzum. In this drush, the Kavana comes, the Pnimius comes from Atzmos. You follow?
Yeah.
V'hainu, the Kasher Gilui Eidin Seif Kedem Tzimtzum when Lifnei Tzimtzum was in the Lifnei Tzimtzum state. Now you have to remember, there's the other factor of Elokus Pepshitas, which is a whole nother shmooze. The difference, Kedem Tzimtzum, not difference in oil. Difference in the B'tiyas. Everything Lifnei Tzimtzum is called about Tzmuzah, but that's another discussion. When they would Eidin Seif Kedem Tzimtzum, Hayu Eses Sfiras Hagenuzas Betelim Lagamri Be'Eidin Seif Abeligavel. The Eidin Seif, which is the Mokav of Eses Sfiras, was completely bottled by Be'Eidin Seif. Ukubitl of Hashem Hashem the nullification of the light of the sun in the sun. The Mepnei Eid Gufash Etzem Hashem, because the sun is so strong. Now you understand. The Eid Kav is separate from the Eidin Seif. It's not only separate that maybe she made two Eidis. They have two different kavanas. The kavanah of Eid Seif Kalamas to Minvatal Elamis. The kavanah of Eid Kav to Megalokus in Elamis. Both of them come from Atzmos. So the Eid Kav is not a byproduct of the Eidin Seif, it's a separate inyan. But it's still weaker than the Eidin Seif. And in the presence of the Eidin Seif, it's bottled. So that's why you have to have siluk of the Eidin Seif legamre for the sake of Kav. Look inside. Valkain, therefore, the Eidin Seif, I believe, has to be removed completely. For the Esfiras and Eid. Remember, the difference is Esfiras and Genuzas, Esfiras and Kates is two things. Number one, it's Ted and not the Ein Seif. And number two, it's Eir Pnimi. It's not Eir Makif. It's Yoshed. It's not Eagle. Valkain, and therefore, Hutzrach Li, it's this almost Ein Seif, but she is Gaza and Esfiras. Says the Rebbe, V'zeh Yaspik, that will be enough. She is Gaza, Kav, Esfiras, and Genuzas. And the Esfiras leave over. Don't take them away. And look at the parenthesis. What do we know about Caleb? 2 minutes. What do we know about Caleb? That you remove that and say when you leave over the Caleb. And that's what creates the Caleb. And Fakir, that makes the Caleb stronger. So the Rebbe Rashab says, just like the Caleb are left over by Tzimtzum Rishon, and that makes the Matthias of the Caleb, leave over the Kav. That's Eis Chaim's Kasher. Because the Kav is in there, Pnimi B'yatzem. The Kav's idea that it's supposed to go into a Keli is true from Atzmos. So you don't have to have the Tzimtzum Rishon to change it from an eagle into a Yesha. It's by itself a Yesha. So leave it over. So the Chaim asks, so why do you have to have that Eidin Seif, which is the Mokar HaKav, should also be removed? Verstehst? Kumei Keich HaGosha Bein Seif, which is the Shimon, which is the Mokar HaKelim. Lo Yoyah Bezat Tzimtzum. Lakshin guy, they Tzimtzum Ei, take away the Eir. The Kelim are left over. So the Rebbe, the Eitz Chaim, that Isel asks the question, Kumei Kain, Yochali is Begili and HaKav. So the Eitz Chaim's kasha is, so why do you have to remove the Rekav also? And the answer is Caleb, which we read yesterday. But you see what's going on here? The Rebbe Rashab takes Eitz Chaim, which has been taught and learned 100 times. And he says, until Drush Zeh, no one was Medaik in this Eitz Chaim correctly.